Hi guys, welcome to my first talk. We're going to try the whole distance learning. I know a lot of you are probably stuck at home and stuck with kids trying to figure out some activities to do. So over the next few weeks, hopefully if I have plenty of time with work, I'm going to be uploading some videos and some things to my blog that you can use as a resource, different marine biology based topics or anything really science related. So if you have an idea that you'd like for me to try or to talk about, just leave me a comment and let me know and we can cover it. But today we are going to cover like a series I'm thinking about doing about like fun facts about different kinds of fish. So today we're going to be talking about the southern flounder. Unfortunately, I don't have like a full-size fish that I can bring you from my living room, but I do have some pictures that we're going to use. And I do have some small specimens that we can look at through the camera. But we have a nice little talk, and everything is going to be posted in text form in my blog. So if you'd like to copy it and print it, you're more than welcome to. And also, I thought it might be nice to have a small worksheet or even a color sheet to go along with this. So if your kids are watching and you're doing some type of homeschooling activity, feel free to follow along. But we'll just go ahead and get started. So the southern flounder, we'll bring our picture back here, is also known as Paralichthes lethostigma. That's its scientific name. And it's one of the most popular and targeted sport fish on the Texas coast. And by far, to me, I think they're one of the most interesting looking fish that we see on our coastline. They're one of my all-time favorites. I really love to fish for them, to eat them, to encounter them while I'm at work. For those of you that don't know me that well, I do work for Texas Parks and Wildlife as a fish and wildlife technician. So basically, we're the guys that are kind of like on the ground collecting samples and assessing fish populations, and a lot of the data that we collect actually goes into making management guidelines for the state. So that's kind of my background coming into this. But anyways, back to the flounder. Southern flounder actually belonged to the family called Paralichthidae, which is a family of flatfishes. So if we want to break it down and take this into like a little bit of an English language, Paralichthidae can also be interpreted as meaning parallel fish because of their flat shape. And if we break it down by the Greek roots of the word, para means beside or near. And if we further interpret that, like it could mean beside or near the sea. And so the second part of its name, lethostigma, also comes from Latin. And the word letho in Latin actually means death, and stigma means spots. And you're probably wondering, well, what the heck does that mean? Well, what sets southern flounder apart from other flounder species is that it doesn't have these very large, big, ocellated spots on it. And hopefully you can see it in my picture here, and it's in the blog as well. But southern flounder kind of have this like dark brown mottled color, and it's next to a Gulf flounder here. And you can see on the Gulf flounder that it has these three really big ocellated spots, and we don't see those in southern flounder. So that could be part of the meaning behind the name. So I'm actually going to reach over here to my tubes. I'm going to put my gloves on, and we're going to take some samples out of the little jars that I brought. Unfortunately, they're very little. They're very small baby flounders. They're all less than a year old. And we'll talk about how we know how old they are in just a second. But I want you guys to see what the actual fish look like. I mean, what kind of fun video would this be if we didn't have like actual fish in my living room, right? So, and I'm just kind of pulling these out of these little jars with a pair of forceps, and you can see how tiny they are. Little teeny tiny. But that's the best we could do in the situation. Also, I don't think that I'm going to bring a full-size fish into my living room. Orange Julius would probably really enjoy that. And if you don't know who Orange Julius is, he's my big fat orange tabby cat. And at some point, he might walk in the background of this video and you might get a bonus cat. But I'm going to try to hold this up to the camera as best I can. Try not to drip ethanol all over my keyboard. But you can see how thin and flat this little fish is. So this fish is probably no more than just a couple months old. And you can see how small he is compared to my hand. I don't know if the camera's going to focus. So there's his front side and his eyes and his little fins. And then here's his belly. So this is his bottom side that would be against like the seafloor. You can see it's white in color. Now these fish have been preserved in ethanol, so they have lost some of their coloration. They do lose color once we preserve them, so they're not going to look as pretty and brown and mottled as the pictures. But, all right, we'll move on. So, next thing I want to talk about is like some of the flounder's like really neat adaptations, or a better way of saying that, if you're not familiar with all the science lingo, is the kind of skills or characteristics that help them to survive in their environment, to be able to eat and live and move. So one of the really cool adaptations that they have is camouflage, and I'm sure that most of you, at least the kids that grew up in the South, know what camouflage is. So flounder can actually change their color and the pigmentation of their skin color depending on what environment that they're in. So if you have a flounder that's in mud, it's probably going to be a dark brown color. But if you have a flounder that's spending a lot of time over sand or shell bottom where it's much lighter in color than mud, the flounder will actually change and be lighter in color. So we see them all kind of different variations of like tan, brown. Sometimes they can almost even appear as white. So that's pretty interesting. So they blend in really well with the bottom. And I have some really cool videos. There's some links that will take you to YouTube where you can see like all kinds of different like flounder and like their colors and how well they like blend in with the bottom. It's very hard to even see them in the videos, even though we know the fish is there. So in addition to their coloration, flounder also lack what we call a swim bladder. So a swim bladder is a really special organ that a fish has that it's not filled with what you think a bladder is filled with in a human body, but it's actually filled with air. So the swim bladder actually controls the buoyancy of the fish and like how well they float in the water column. And so if a flounder doesn't have a swim bladder, that means that they're probably spending a lot of time on the bottom. So it's one of their special adaptations to just kind of hang out on the bottom. So in addition to those, their eyes are their next adaptation that I want to talk about. And I'm going to bring one of our little friends from the Petri dish back up here to show you. Hopefully you guys can see that, but do you see how its eyes are like pointed up? And both of its eyes are located on the top of its head. So say my hand is the bottom of the seafloor here, and our flounder's just sitting there. It has both of its eyes on the side of its head as it's laying flat on the bottom, so it's able to look all around itself. So, coupled with being able to see all around with its eyes, with the lack of the swim bladder, and being able to camouflage in with the bottom, they are the perfect ambush predator, which is pretty cool. And there's all kinds of really neat slow motion videos out there where you can actually see them in action. I have one below for you to watch. So ambush predators, as far as fish are concerned, they use these tactics to actually hide, and then when another little fish or a shrimp or something comes out, they will actually come up off the bottom and strike rapidly to be able to get their prey to eat. And then not to mention another adaptation that they have is they do have very sharp teeth. Our little babies here in the Petri dish, their teeth aren't very sharp yet. They're eating much smaller things than fish or shrimp. They're actually eating zooplankton, but once they get bigger, they do have very sharp teeth to be able to latch on to their prey. So now that we've kind of covered what the flounder looks like and where it likes to hang out, you're thinking, well, where in the world are these actually found? So obviously, like I said, on the bottom is a good answer to that question, but they are found in the Gulf of Mexico. So here. And they are also found up the Atlantic seaboard to about North Carolina. So they have a pretty wide range. In addition to just their geographic location, they really enjoy spending time in like marsh habitat, bays, beaches, any kind of coastal waters. They can be found offshore And they can even be found up rivers, which is really interesting. And they've been found up to like 100 miles upriver, which is truly amazing. And you're probably wondering, Katie, how does saltwater fish live in a river? Well, flounder are also specially adapted to be able to tolerate a wide range of salinity. And salinity is a measure of how much salt is in the water. So obviously, ocean water is very high salinity. It has a lot of salt. But fresh water that like comes out of a river doesn't have any salinity, or has very, very little salinity where it actually meets a bay. So flounder are a special word that we like to call euryhaline, which means a fish or an animal that can tolerate a wide range of salinity. So we're going to move on to talking about some more of the flounder's life. And what I can tell you about flounder is that they grow very, very fast. Like these little guys in my dish here are very tiny. They are probably no more than a couple months old. But within their first year of life, they can get up to 12 inches, 1 whole foot. So what's really cool about the size of flounder is that we can also tell whether a flounder is a male or a female by how big it is, typically. So male flounders tend to get no bigger than about 12 to 13 inches. And if you actually see a big flounder, it's most likely a female, and they can reach lengths up to 28 inches. I've personally never seen one that big, but they can get much bigger, and females always end up being bigger than the males. I'd like to think it's because maybe they have bigger brains, but, you know, I guess there's not really much science to back that up. And also, the male flounders do typically have a shorter lifespan than females. Ladies, I don't know if we're like starting to see a pattern in nature yet or anything. Just kidding, kids. That's a mom joke. So, flounder do spend most of their time hanging out in the bays and rivers. However, during the fall season, they make a migration. And it's commonly known, especially with fishermen, as the flounder run. So during this time, the flounder are moving from the bays and the bay passes into the Gulf of Mexico. And they are making this migration so they can reproduce and make a whole bunch more baby flounder. So they began making this migration when they're about 2 years old. And they will go into the Gulf of Mexico until they reach depths of about 50 to 100 feet. The females will begin releasing eggs, which are then fertilized by the males. And the eggs are buoyant, so they actually will float. So after approximately 2 days later, the larval fish are going to hatch, and they are going to swim in an upright position. And we've got a little drawing here of what they actually look like when they hatch. So this is what the baby flounder looks like. And if you're noticing something cool here, you notice like you're only seeing one eye. So flounder are actually going to undergo what we call an eye migration. So as the baby flounder gets older, these eyes are slowly going to migrate over to the side of the head here. And this picture is in my blog for you to make bigger, until they have migrated and they are both located on the same side of the head. So for southern flounder specifically, they're going to migrate to the left side. So they are specifically what we call a left-eyed flounder, meaning the eyes are on the left side when the flounder is in the up position. So once the flounder reaches about 1/2 inch in length, the eye migration is actually complete. And the eyes are going to remain up on the top for the remainder of its life. They do not migrate backwards. Okay. So once the eye migration is complete and the baby flounder have hatched out, they are usually feeding on zooplankton, and I actually am like super lucky that we actually have some in the bottom of this jar, so you can see just how teeny tiny they are. They came out of one of the little baby flounder's stomachs. I don't know if you can see them too well, but they're very small. So they do have to make their way back to some kind of nursery habitat. They don't stay in the Gulf of Mexico. If they were to stay there, they'd probably be like pretty picked on by predators. So they are actually coming back in to look for like a suitable habitat, something with like a sand bottom or grass, something that can give them cover to like blend in and hide from any kind of predators while they grow. So not only must they avoid those predators, but if the water is too warm, baby flounder do not tend to survive, unfortunately. They have a very, very narrow temperature range. And so really warm winters they do not help our flounder populations, unfortunately. So during the late winter and early spring, so right now is actually the perfect time. Usually we start seeing them in February. The flounder will actually move back into the bay passes from the Gulf of Mexico. And at this stage of life, they're approximately a half of an inch to about an inch in length. And biologists, like when we find them in our bag stands, we call them young of year flounder. As they continue to grow and get bigger, they start migrating more and more inward into our bays and our marsh systems. Some of them will even travel up into like coastal bayous, up the rivers, and they continue to grow there. They switch once they get larger from feeding on zooplankton, and they begin eating smaller invertebrates. Shrimp is actually one of their favorite foods, and shrimp are a type of crustacean. And then as they begin to grow into adults, they'll actually start shifting their diet to smaller fish. And one of their all-time favorite fish to eat is the Gulf killifish. But a lot of fishermen in bait shops will refer to these as mud or bull minnows. And I wish I would have brought one to show you. They're pretty neat little fish. They like to hang out in the marsh as well. So that's a little bit about the life history of the flounder. Like I said earlier, they're a ton of fun to catch. They taste wonderful. Maybe we can have some recipes added to the blog eventually. But they are very commercially and recreationally important, not only in the state of Texas, but all over. Lots of people get out and fish the flounder run and enjoy it. You can find them on numerous seafood markets and menus at restaurants. But I will say the best tasting ones are the ones that you catch yourself with your friends and family. So if anyone's looking for a good social distancing activity, fishing is definitely one up there. And just remember that life is better outside. So that concludes my lesson, but leave me a comment. Let me know if you guys enjoyed the short talk. Check in and let me know you were here, because we're actually keeping track of like how many people that our outreach efforts are reaching. So my boss would really like to know like how many people are actually following along with what we're doing here. And I do have some videos posted in my blog. Some of them are from Parks and Wildlife. There's a worksheet, but just let me know if you enjoyed it. Leave me a comment. I really look forward to you guys sitting down and enjoying my living room and learning with me. So, bye.